The world's first sub-3. Seymour had skipped straight over 2:59 to a 2:58.50. His run was roughly even through episode 6, but he saved some time later over mistakes and slowdowns in his last week. And at the end of the run, he still had to execute tricks like cut skip and DP3. It was an intense situation. He was able to clutch them out and get the first sub-3. Interestingly, about half an hour before the end of Seymour's run, Wii Super started a run of his own. And this run would finish as a 2:59.04, the world's second sub-3. Had Wii Super started his run just a few hours earlier, he would have won the race to sub-3. But instead, he had to settle for second place, while Seymour got worried. But Seymour's record wouldn't last long. He beat his own run by 43 seconds just a day later. This run was notable for introducing a piece of RNG. In 4-4, there's a section where Obi-Wan is supposed to appear across the room on a bridge after you arrive. The way the game tries to get him there is by running through a room with barrels. If he gets stuck behind a barrel, the game turns him to try and get around them, which slows him down, but he still eventually arrives on the bridge. Usually. Sometimes he gets stuck. And if that happens, he never shows up, and you can't progress through the level. LEGO Star Wars is important. Now, runners used to have a way around this. You reload the bridge room by entering and exiting the previous room, which guarantees Obi-Wan will show up for a 2-second time loss. But players then found 4-4 cutscene skip. By jumping off of this ledge, you can hook back and enter an out-of-bounds area to skip to the next room. This means a cutscene doesn't play and you save 18 seconds. However, as a consequence of the cutscene not playing, you can no longer reload the bridge room, since you wouldn't be able to leave the previous room you enter in. So, Obi-Wan RNG was back into play. If he didn't want to show up, you were in big trouble. A couple weeks later, a fairly substantial change was made. The community decided to alter the way runs were timed. Instead of starting when the players gained control in 1-1, it would now begin with selecting New Game on the main menu. This was mostly done so that movement in the cantina would be considered in the final time. It added roughly 58 seconds to all runs. So, when Seymour set a record that would have been 2:57.36 under the old timing, it was retimed to 2:58.34. And that made it 4 consecutive records for Seymour. He was the first to sub-3, and now he was taking control of the leaderboard. And for Wii Super, he just couldn't catch up. He perpetually remained slightly behind Seymour, easily in second place, but ever since he missed his chance at the first sub-3, the world record deleted. But after the 2:58.34, Seymour announced that he would be taking a break from the category to focus his efforts elsewhere. Maybe this was the chance Wii Super needed. With Seymour at least temporarily out of the picture, he could hone in on improving his time without needing to compete with anyone. And as it turns out, just 2 days later, it was only record by a second, but Wii Super had finally overtaken Seymour. It was a run with a great early game, but he lost some time on Speeder Skip and had a weak episode 4. Still, Wii Super had broken through. Was this a one-time deal? Or was he about to make something more out of it? 6 days later, a 60-second record improvement by Wii Super, largely due to saving time in episode 4. The very next day, another minute and a half more record. 3 weeks later, 2 record improvements improvements on the same day. 3 days later, a record cut by nearly 2 full minutes. Then Wii Super took a break, and when he came back, another world record. 7 records over the course of 3 months for Wii Super. The final one was a time of 2:53.04. After a while, Seymour had come back to attempts, but this time the tables were turned. He was the one who couldn't catch up to Wii Super. The way he went on this run was through both improving his own skills and utilizing new strategies. In 2-6, Wii Super began using Dooku skill. By standing on a barrel, you can force it with player 2 and flip under the floor. By then dropping out with the inbounds player, you can lead them forward past the trigger for the Dooku fight and enter the next room. The trick was found by Seymour and saves up to 30 seconds. Wii Super also began using the vehicle smart bomb red. It allows you to hold the special button in ship levels and make everything on screen explode, which can save you about 20 seconds in 5-1. And interestingly, with these new tricks being incorporated and runners' skill levels improving, someone new moved into second place, Chimkin. He had been in third place for months, even being a part of the initial sub-3 grind, but he always remained behind Wii Super and Seymour. But he was improving. By May, he was ahead of Seymour. And sure enough, when Wii Super woke up on the morning of July 6th, his record was gone. Chimkin had beaten it by over a minute, getting a 2:52 flat. It was a run with a slow early game, but after a bold split in 3-2, he was off to the races. He pulled ahead of the record and crushed it. So, Wii Super had to get back to work. And it took him 13 hours to get the record back. Over the coming weeks and months, Wii Super and Chimkin would trade the record back and forth. Wii Super was the first to take another 250 with a 2:49.55 on July 17th. Chimkin would get the next record, and by the end of the year, it was down to 2:45.39. How did these two take the record down by 7 minutes? Well, there was a new red brick, Fast Force, which does what it sounds like. It lets you force objects faster. To obtain it quicker, Chimkin found a method of going out of bounds, then doing a depth work to get back on track. It's unlocked in 4-2, so players started playing episode 4 earlier in the run so they could use Fast Force in episode 6, 3, and 5. And of course, there were a plethora of new strategies discovered in the second half of 2019. Some were small and saved a few seconds, while others saved closer to half a minute. But the big one was in 5-6. It's the last stage of the game, and it had an evolution of skips over years. Way back during TSG's record reign, runners started doing a trick called best spin out of bounds. You jump roll off a ledge to land out of bounds, and progress forward in the stage to skip having to build C3PO and open the door. It saved 45 seconds, but was immensely difficult. Players used this trick for years, but in December 2019, Seymour found something better. You join with player 2 and put Lando in a doorway. If player 1 stands far enough away and Lando jumps, the door will close. If it closes while you're at the top of your jump, you'll get pushed through the door frame and out of bounds. Ultimately, you can get to the same room as you did from best spin out of bounds, but it allows you to do so nearly a full minute faster, and is much easier. The only problem is that if you miss the door flip initially, AI characters can randomly run near the door and prevent it from closing, so you really want to get the trick first try. With all these time saves combined, and runners still improving their skills on top of that, the world record was down to a really solid 2:45. It was enough for Wii Super to take a break from grinding the category, and Chimkin had stopped playing it as well. Other than those two, nobody had a PB under 2 hours and 8 minutes. But over the coming weeks in late 2019 and early 2020, the game will get a huge boost in popularity, thanks to an unlikely switch Wars. TikTok. There was a big wave of nostalgia for LEGO Star Wars. Millions played it while growing up, and after years had passed, they looked back on the game fondly. A trend began on TikTok where people changed their profile pics to mimic how they look in LEGO Star Wars, with a green or blue circle around them. This increased the game's popularity on the internet as a whole, as people remembered LEGO Star Wars and wanted to experience it again. As such, speedrun streams and videos exploded in popularity, and starting in early 2020, there was a new wave of speedrun activity. And suddenly, by February, Wii Super had new competitors on its doorstep. In second place was T-Fresh, and in third place was Led Astray. Both had a time of 2:47, and both had aspirations for the world record. Wii Super had no choice but to do more runs if he wanted to defend his title. So he did. And in the span of just 1 week, he lowered the record twice, taking it down to 2:44. But this wasn't the complete domination that he had earlier. His competition continued to close in. Led Astray got a 2:46, and a familiar face had actually jumped into second place. Seamer. The pressure was on for Wii Super. These guys were both capable of getting the record, could really obtain it any day now. Wii Super continued to do runs. And a couple weeks later, he achieved a run that put away any competition for the record. Months of attempts had all led up to this moment. It was his ultimate run. Throughout the first 4 episodes, there were no significant mistakes. He gained a bit of time on nearly every level, and leaving episode 6, he was nearly 2 minutes ahead. The final 2 episodes are 3 and 5, and although they weren't perfect, they were good enough. When combined with the incredible start he'd had, the end result was a monster world record. Wii Super wasn't that much risk of losing his title anymore. Or was he? Seymour wasn't deterred from the task at hand. Wii Super was now 3 minutes ahead, but Seymour knew he could close the gap. On March 27th, he took his PB down to 2:44, and on the 31st, he shaved another half minute off. Despite the optimization of Wii Super's record, Seymour was actually able to close in. These two guys were ahead of the pack. Just like the initial sub-3 grind, Wii Super and Seymour were locked in a battle. Thanks to the game's boost in popularity around this time, the community decided to have a LEGO Star Wars speedrun tournament. Wii Super, Seymour, and most of the game's other top runners all participated. It was a double elimination tournament. There were some great times put up by several different runners. But when all was said and done, after the brackets were completed, who else would be in the finals but Wii Super and Seymour? These two would get the benefit of a big new strategy discovered a few weeks ago in 6-1, Spider Race. By using a forcible object, you could clip it to the wall, which was faster than the old method of using the spider. You can then come back in bounds to touch a grade, which acts as a trigger for the game to send you straight to the boss fight and skip the cutscene. This trick saved a full 60 seconds, a huge advantage for any runner who can pull it off. Up to this point, Seymour had lost 1 match while Wii Super was undefeated. So to win the whole thing, Seymour needed to win twice, while Wii Super needed just 1 win. And Seymour handily won the first game. Wii Super accidentally soft-blocked in 5-1, losing several minutes and allowing Seymour to lose to an easy victory. That meant there would be a winner-take-all match the next day to determine the tournament champion. This was going to be a tough task for Seymour. Think of all he had going against him. His personal best was nearly a minute behind Wii Super. He had lost to him earlier in the tournament, and he'd gotten a pretty lucky victory yesterday thanks to a fluke softball. He was going to need to played out of his mind. He wanted to win this thing. And so, on April 19th, 2020, in the final match of the tournament, with his opponent heavily favored to win, this was Seanor's first world record in over a year, back when the run was 16 minutes slower. And it was actually a close race through much of the run, but Senor eventually pulled ahead. And although B Super finished with a 2:42, he didn't stand a chance. Senor won the match, he won the tournament, and he got the world record. And the race to sub 240 was officially on. Once
Something
again,
just happened to make him pull back.
Senor and B Super were the two competitors. As it turns out, Senor's time at the top wouldn't last long. B Super wanted the record back, and it took him just 5 days to do so. He got a 2:40.32. This run was actually on sub 240 pace until 5-5.
Why is their pathfinding so
The last
good?
2 stages of the run are 2 of the toughest.
I'm actually literally cornered right now. I have no choice but to run.
5-5 and to door clip in 5-6. Sub 240 would have to wait. Sub 240 would have to wait. B Super lost 45 seconds to door clip and missed sub 240 by just 4 seconds. It's a great example of how tough the end of the run is. Door clip is in the very last stage. If you miss it initially, bad luck making you lose the record. Over the following few weeks, competition caught up. A couple runners named Pickle Toe and Ginger Legend got times in the 241 range, increasing the pressure on B Super. And on July 14th, Senor had a run on sub 240 pace in 5-6. But once again, door clip killed it. He ended up 1 second behind the world record. B Super had waited too long. Other players had caught up, and it was a dead heat for sub 240. But on July 22nd, B Super had a run with a fantastic first few episodes. He then lost his helmet in 4-5, but a great episode 6 put him back in the lead. He had a rough 5-5, but with time to save in 5-6, sub 240 was still possible. He got door clip quickly and left just enough room to go sub 240, 2:39.49. B Super had won the race. This was B Super's 22nd world record. He'd faced competition from some of the best in the world, but time and time again, he had proven he could come out on top. With his sub 240 goal accomplished, B Super finally felt take a break. And the runners in 2nd through 4th place, Senor, Pickle Toe, and Ginger Legend, have lost motivation after being beaten to the first sub 240. So, they all stopped running the category as well. For the first time in many months, there was little activity at the top of the leaderboard. That meant there was technically an opportunity for someone outside of the top 4 to swoop in and make a move. Let's take a look at who was in 5th place. This is E Roadhouse. He had been running the game for about 3 months and managed to quickly enter the game's top 5. However, during the sub 240 grind, he was comfortably behind the big 4 runners. He wasn't considered to have a serious shot at the world record. With all 4 of them stepping aside, this was his chance. In early August, he stepped into 4th place and lowered his PB down to 2:41.12. And on August 10th, he got on a run where he pulled about 15 seconds ahead of the record by the end of episode 4. There was still a long way to go, but he kept nailing tough tricks. Spiderless in 6-1, speeder skip in 6-3. A shot at the world record was starting to seem more and more like a reality. He was competing against incredible episode 3 of the world record, so he bled some time there, but going into the last 2 levels of the run, 5-5 and 5-6, he was only half a minute behind. Time to enter the trick gauntlet. DV1, first try. DV3, he faltered a bit but got it 5th try. DV4 jumps, both first try. Finally, Dorco, 2nd try. This all saved about 40 seconds for the last 2 levels of Wii Super's run. It was enough for E Roadhouse to get a 2:39.33. He had leapfrogged over Pickletail, Xenor, and Wii Super to get the world record.
Like the party switch.
There was a new face on top of the leaderboard. Well, Wii Super wasn't going to take this lying down. E Roadhouse only beat him by 6 seconds. Surely it wouldn't be too hard to take the record back. But Wii Super wanted something better. There had been a number of new strategies developed around this time. Wii Super knew that if he utilized them all in a full run, he could beat E Roadhouse's time by minutes. We won't go over all of these new tricks, but there's 2 particularly
I'm facing
big
south
ones.
right now.
And the first one,
If I turn right,
LEGO Star Wars has an ultra
I'll go
shot.
like this.
Level 1-4 is the pod race. You have to drive around the course 3 times to beat the stage. For years, there was no way to really speed this up. Even the fastest world records just broke the 3 laps. But in mid-2020, P53, Hamster, and Xenor combined to develop a trick called Pod Frog. It's a very complicated trick, but the gist of it is that the game's only method for checking lap completion is seeing if you've touched an area on the far side of the course, and seeing if you've touched the finish line region. So after driving a lap normally, you go out of bounds with 2 players, leave one by the finish line region, and try to get the other to the far side. This middle section out of bounds kills you, but it lets you build up speed quickly. So, by dying a few times, you can build up enough speed to make it across. By touching this region, the next lap is activated, and you skip having to drive around. This setup takes about 25 seconds, but a lap normally takes about 60, so you save over half a minute.
Becca.
The big skip is called Reeve Cheese, discovered by Pickletoe with concepts from Festeo. The general Grievous fight is normally a slow, scripted battle, where you jump around the level and then attack him on the main platform. However, you'll only perform the scripted actions if you're actively standing on this platform. So, you can use Obi-Wan to lure him toward a rock, then jump off the platform and shoot him with player 2 before he walks too far away. By repeating this over and over, you can drain his health without having him ever perform scripted actions. Unfortunately, there's RNG. He can randomly block your shots, which wastes time.
Almost there.
But ideally, Reeve Cheese can save over half a minute. With all this and more, Wii Super felt that he